Have you ever walked into a place where you knew something was off, but couldn't prove it? What if you booked a table, showed up on time, and were told you didn't exist? Just because of your beliefs. This isn't fiction. This happened. When Karoline Leavitt walked into a trendy cafe in Washington, she wasn't looking for a fight. But what unfolded became a national moment caught on camera, shared across America, and impossible to ignore. If you care about fairness, dignity, and what's happening to free speech in public places, don't blink. This is the story they didn't expect you to see. After a grueling week of press briefings and tense backroom battles in Washington, Karoline Leavitt wanted just one thing: peace and coffee. No interviews, no cameras, no political theater. Just a quiet table where she could clear her head. She chose Café Value, one of DC's newer upscale spots, nestled just a few blocks from DuPont Circle. Sleek glass-paneled front, warm lighting, polished wood and brass accents. The kind of place where business deals happened quietly, and no one asked too many questions. It also happened to be part of a hospitality group run by a longtime family friend, which gave her a sense of comfort, if not anonymity. To keep things under the radar, she booked the reservation under a name no one would recognize: Karoline West. Not even her assistant knew. She wanted to blend in, take a break from being the press secretary, and just be a woman with a laptop and a cappuccino. No entourage, no press. Inside, the place buzzed with the late lunch crowd, lawyers scrolling headlines, interns glued to tablets, and the occasional congressional staffer whispering over espresso. Karoline stepped in, subtle but unmistakable. Light navy blazer, tan slacks, platinum blonde hair, pulled back into a neat ponytail. She walked with the kind of calm confidence that only came from years of public scrutiny. Behind the host stand stood Sienna, a 24-year-old with bright red hair pulled into a messy bun, round wire-frame glasses, and a sarcastic smirk that seemed permanent. One AirPod dangled from her ear, the faint sound of a feminist podcast droning on about liberating spaces from outdated voices. Her nails were painted neon green. One hand lazily scrolled through TikTok, while the other half-heartedly flipped through the reservation screen. Karoline approached the desk and offered a polite nod. "Hi, I have a reservation under Karoline West," she said, her voice calm and clear. Sienna didn't look up right away. She finished watching a 10-second clip of someone shouting into a megaphone, then tapped the screen a few times. Her tone was light, but distant. I'm not seeing anything under that name. Maybe it didn't go through." Karoline raised an eyebrow. It was confirmed this morning. 1:30 p.m., two-top corner table. Sienna blinked, then gave her a long look. Not rude, just that blank stare that younger people sometimes gave when sizing you up for social relevance. Then something shifted. Her eyes narrowed ever so slightly. "Wait," she said slowly. "Aren't you Karoline Leavitt?" The pause in the cafe was almost imperceptible but real. The name held weight. The former Trump press secretary. The young firebrand conservative woman who'd held her own on live TV more times than most senators dared. Karoline didn't flinch. "I'm here under Karoline West." Sienna tilted her head. Her voice didn't raise, but the tone changed, tinged with amusement, maybe a hint of smugness. "Well, Karoline West, I'm just telling you what the system says." She turned the screen slightly toward Karoline, a meaningless gesture since it showed nothing relevant. "It's not there. Happens sometimes." Karoline glanced briefly at the screen, then back at Sienna. "This happens often." Sienna shrugged. "Not to most people. But then again, most people aren't. You." There it was. The passive dig. The double meaning. She didn't say the word Trump, but it hovered in the air like static. Karoline took a slow breath, hands resting calmly on the edge of the podium. "Would you mind checking again?" she asked. Sienna's eyes sparkled with something more than customer service. We tend to reserve our tables for people who align better with the atmosphere here. You know, progressive, inclusive, open-minded. Karoline's voice didn't rise. You mean people who agree with you politically? Sienna smiled sweetly. I didn't say that. No, she hadn't. But she didn't have to. From a table nearby, an older gentleman in a tan blazer looked up, frowning slightly. A woman with a laptop paused her typing. The temperature in Café Valu had shifted just slightly, but enough for anyone with instincts to feel it. Karoline stood still. The calm in her posture was the kind that unnerved people who tried to provoke a reaction. She wasn't here to play a scene. She was here for a seat, and now she wasn't being given one, for reasons that had nothing to do with logistics. And Sienna knew exactly what she was doing. The silence between them wasn't awkward. It was intentional. Karoline stood there still and composed the hum of the espresso machine in the background, the only thing filling the air for a few seconds. She kept her tone even, her words deliberate. I booked under Karoline West. Please check again. Sienna didn't move right away. She gave Karoline a slow, amused smile, the kind that wasn't meant to ease tension but to poke at it. We prioritize guests who align with the atmosphere we try to create here, she said sweetly. You know, open-minded, inclusive. Safe. There it was again, the coded language of exclusion wrapped in the vocabulary of tolerance. From across the room, a man in his late 60s in a beige windbreaker glanced up from his newspaper. Two younger women at a laptop paused their conversation mid-sentence. Something unspoken had shifted. The cafe wasn't just buzzing anymore, it was listening. Karoline met Sienna's eyes without blinking. Are you suggesting that I'm not welcome here because of my beliefs? Sienna tilted her head like someone trying to remember where they parked their car. No one said that she answered, voice, sing-song, lips, curled. I'm just saying we try to maintain a space that's progressive, inclusive, especially for communities that have been well marginalized. She glanced at Karoline's cross necklace, subtle but unmistakable. A quiet symbol of faith that in places like this said more than a campaign button ever could. The pause lengthened. Karoline could feel the room watching now. Not openly, not dramatically, but in that Washington, D.C. way. Subtle side glances, posture shifts, the slight hush that falls over a place when someone realizes they're witnessing something political in real time. Sienna leaned in slightly, her voice dropping half an octave, but still loud enough for nearby tables to catch every word. I mean, you've gone on record opposing climate action, backing policies that hurt LGBTQ rights, and calling out this generation's values as dangerous. And now here you are, wanting to sip an oat milk latte in a place built on inclusion. Karoline didn't flinch. She didn't even blink. She replied quietly. So this is political? Sienna's smile stayed, but her eyes narrowed just a touch. No, ma'am. This is about protecting our community. It wasn't a slip. It was a confession. And that's when it became clear the reservation hadn't gone missing. It had been erased on purpose. The smiling AirPod-wearing receptionist wasn't simply disorganized or overwhelmed. She was acting on belief, her version of justice. The worst part, she thought she had the moral high ground. Karoline took a slow step closer, her voice still even, but with a harder edge now. Let me ask you plainly. Did you deny me a table because I worked for President Trump? Sienna's expression didn't change, but her stance shifted, arms folding as if bracing for a debate. I'm saying that we all have the right to choose the kind of space we want to support. And I think most people here would agree your politics don't align with the values we stand for. Someone coughed softly nearby. Another pulled out their phone. The line between cafe and stage had now disappeared. Karoline gave a quiet, humorless laugh. You mean I don't share your values? Therefore I don't get to sit? Sienna replied with faux sweetness. You can get coffee anywhere in the city. Maybe find a spot that feels more like home. It was the kind of insult that pretended to be helpful, and that's what made it sting more. Karoline's voice cut through the tension like glass. You just admitted that you're refusing to serve me because of my political stance. I hope you understand what that means. The redhead didn't back down. I'm standing up for people this space was built to protect. That's what I hope you understand. Protect. That word again. As if Karoline's presence alone was a threat. As if a quiet, paying customer who had simply wanted a seat and a break somehow endangered the entire establishment's sense of moral order. It wasn't about coffee anymore. It wasn't even about politics. It was about power and who was allowed to wield it in public spaces. Karoline knew this game. She'd faced tougher interrogations on national television, stood at the White House press podium while the world threw knives. But there was something uniquely disturbing about this moment. Not because of the hostility, but because of the certainty in Sienna's face. The righteousness. This wasn't a mistake. It was deliberate exclusion framed as progressive virtue. Behind Karoline, someone's phone clicked, camera shutter. The bystanders were no longer pretending not to watch. The tension had turned into a story, and the story was unfolding in real time. I came here as a customer, Karoline said, her voice calm but firm. I made a reservation, confirmed it, and arrived on time. You saw my name. You saw my face. And because of that, you decided to erase me. Sienna rolled her eyes, her patience slipping. Oh, come on. No one's erasing you. You're all over TV. You're in magazines. You've got more power than most people in this city ever will. Karoline tilted her head. Power has nothing to do with what you just did. You didn't delete a name. You tried to erase someone's right to exist in a public space simply because you don't like what they believe. Sienna bit back. Maybe you should think about how your beliefs make others feel. Karoline gave a short nod. I have. That's why I don't walk into cafes and erase people's names off the guest list. For a second, Sienna said nothing. Her smirk faltered. Her eyes scanned Karoline's face, and for the first time she saw something she didn't expect: complete control. Karoline didn't need to yell. She didn't need to make a scene. Because she had the truth. And the truth was heavy, undeniable, and about to hit harder than any clever TikTok post could ever hope to. She slowly reached into her bag and pulled out her phone. You made a choice, Sienna. Now I'll make mine. The screen lit up. Her finger moved fast, already scrolling through contacts. She didn't need a name badge to know who ran the system behind this cafe. She knew the infrastructure. She'd worked with people who built it. And in the corner of the room, one older man muttered to his wife, "She's about to make a call." He wasn't wrong. Karoline stepped slightly aside from the host stand, brought the phone to her ear, and waited. Graham's voice came through, crisp and professional. Yes, Miss Leavitt. Pull the guest log for Café Valou, she said. Search Karoline West. I want to know when the booking was created and who accessed it. Beat of silence. Then on it. 1 minute. Sienna's eyes darted toward the screen, but she couldn't hide behind it anymore. Because whatever excuse she thought she had, it was about to be logged, time-stamped, and exposed. And this time it wasn't Karoline who'd be making a scene. It was the system itself. The tension in Café Valou had reached a low, brittle pitch. Nothing exploded, but everything cracked. Karoline's voice had remained calm, her posture still. But what hung in the air now wasn't a debate. It was a countdown, phone still at her ear. Karoline turned slightly, just enough to put some space between herself and the counter where Sienna stood. No need for posturing. She wasn't looking to win an argument. She was collecting proof. On the other end of the line, Graham, her longtime aide and now her tech consultant, answered with the crisp reliability of a man who knew when something was serious. "Yes, Miss Leavitt. I need the reservation log for Café Valou," she said, eyes never leaving Sienna. "The booking was made under Karoline West. I want a full timestamp when it was created, when it was accessed, and if there were any edits. And I want to know who touched it." There was a short pause on the line, then Graham's voice turned sharp with purpose. "On it. Give me 90 seconds. And just like that, the game changed. Sienna, arms still folded, shifted her stance. Her eyes darted toward the host's screen, then back to Karoline's phone, then quickly away. She wasn't smiling anymore. The certainty was fading, and what replaced it looked suspiciously like fear. Karoline didn't say a word. She didn't have to. The truth had already been set in motion, and it was coming straight for the smug layer of moral superiority that Sienna had wrapped herself in, like armor. The quiet in the cafe deepened. A few more phones tilted ever so slightly. One young man at a side booth mouthed something to his friend, who nodded toward the scene with raised brows. Then Karoline's phone buzzed. Text received. From Graham, log report. Value system access reservation created 10:12 a.m. Karoline West accessed 12:04 p.m. Search conducted Karoline Leavitt. Same terminal manual deletion of reservation 12:08 p.m. Actioned by user ID Sienna. That was it. Karoline didn't gloat. She didn't raise her voice or call attention to herself. She simply turned her screen outward, holding it up for Sienna to see. "Your terminal," she said evenly, "searched my real name at 12:04. Then deleted the reservation at 12:08. Same login, same machine." Sienna blinked. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. Karoline stepped closer just a few inches. Not threatening, not loud, but resolute. "You didn't lose my reservation. You didn't forget to check the system. You deliberately looked me up, recognized who I was, and then erased it." A beat of silence. The air itself seemed to pull tighter. Sienna finally found her voice, though it lacked its earlier smug lilt. That could be a system glitch. I mean, sometimes those logs aren't accurate. Maybe it auto-deleted. Karoline's eyes narrowed slightly. "Is that the story you're going with?" The redhead looked down, then back up. Her cheeks flushed red, but her voice rose just enough to try and regain ground. "You can't prove intent." "I didn't say anything." Karoline gave a short, cold laugh. "You don't have to say it. The log says it for you." Another phone buzzed. Karoline tapped the screen again, this time putting Graham on speaker. "Graham," she said, "can you repeat the log entries?" His voice came through clear, firm, and emotionless. A White House veteran who'd delivered facts under much harsher spotlights. "Yes, ma'am. The reservation under Karoline West was created at 10:12 a.m. The system was accessed by the user Sienna H at 12:04 p.m. Search query was Karoline Leavitt. 4 minutes later at 12:08, the reservation was manually deleted. No system error. No auto process. Pure manual override." The cafe erupted in whispers. From the back, someone murmured, "She's caught." Another added, "Wow. That's bad." Sienna's face went pale. Her hands dropped to her sides, fingers twitching slightly. Karoline ended the call and looked her square in the eyes. "You weaponized your job to make a political statement. You decided I didn't belong here, not because I broke a rule, but because I made you uncomfortable." Sienna tried to speak again, but Karoline didn't give her the chance. "You called this place a safe space, but only for people who think like you. That's not inclusion. That's control." The room was still. Even the barista behind the counter had stopped tamping espresso grounds. "You think because I'm from the other side of the aisle I don't deserve the same service as anyone else?" You think you're being bold, brave even, but you're just proving exactly what so many Americans fear, that tolerance only applies when you're on the right side of someone else's checklist. Karoline's voice never trembled. It never rose. But it carried weight, the kind that doesn't need volume because it speaks with truth. Then slowly she placed her phone on the counter. And now she said quietly, "I'm going to call the man who owns this chain. The one who trusts you to treat all customers with professionalism. And I'm going to ask him why your personal politics are more powerful than the reservation system he pays for." Sienna stepped back. Karoline's hand was already moving, her finger dialing. The name Lucas Merrow appeared on the screen. Founder, CEO, owner of Value Hospitality Group, and an old family friend who had once told Karoline, "If anyone ever gives you trouble in one of my places, call me first." And she was calling. Sienna finally spoke, her voice higher now, cracking at the edges. "Wait. Please. I didn't mean... It's not like that." Karoline's face didn't soften. "It's exactly like that." The phone rang once. Twice. "Lucas." "It's Karoline," she said as soon as the line picked up. "We have a problem." She turned her head slightly, eyes still on Sienna. "One of your employees just deleted my reservation. On purpose. Because she didn't like my politics." Another pause. Karoline's expression didn't change, but her voice lowered. "Her name is Sienna. I have the system log. I have a witness. And the cafe is full of people watching this unfold." Sienna's lips parted, then closed again. She stepped back from the host stand, almost as if gravity itself changed. The high ground she thought she owned was gone, and in its place was hard, undeniable fact. Karoline hung up. "He's on his way," she said simply. For the first time in the last 10 minutes, Sienna looked truly afraid. And Karoline. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She simply stood still, her hands resting lightly at her sides. Calm. Precise. Ready. Because when arrogance meets evidence, there's no need to raise your voice. You just let the truth do the talking. The tension in Café Value was no longer something you could ignore. It had settled into the air like humidity before a storm, thick, heavy, and impossible to escape. At the front of the cafe, Karoline Leavitt stood firm. Behind the counter, Sienna looked like a statue carved from anxiety. The only movement was the flicker of phones recording quietly, and the rising hum of whispers just beneath audible speech. Then the front doors opened. They didn't slam or creak. They just parted. And in walked Lucas Merrow. He wasn't wearing a suit. He didn't need to. Navy slacks, a slate-gray button-down rolled to the elbows, brown leather boots. Everything about him spoke one language: ownership. Late 40s, calm but commanding, with the trimmed beard and squared shoulders of a man who had built something from the ground up and wasn't about to let it unravel over a misplaced sense of activism. His eyes scanned the cafe with precision. Not frantic. Not confused. Controlled. And the moment he saw Karoline standing at the front, his pace shifted into a deliberate, businesslike stride. He didn't need to guess what had happened, he already knew. All eyes followed him as he walked. Sienna turned pale. Lucas didn't acknowledge the quiet guests. Didn't glance at the phones, now subtly raised in corners. His eyes locked onto Sienna, and then onto the phone still lying on the host stand screen, open to the system log. He didn't ask for confirmation. He didn't need preamble. "Karoline," he said, his tone low but direct. "I came as soon as I got your call." She nodded, still calm. "Thank you. I wanted you to see this for yourself." She tapped the phone screen once more, handing it to him. "Reservation made." 10:12 a.m., cancelled manually at 12:08 p.m. Accessed under her login after a search for my real name. Lucas didn't even blink. He turned to Sienna. Is that accurate? Sienna hesitated, her voice so small it barely registered. I was just trying to protect the space. I didn't want the energy in here to shift. You know, with her. Lucas cut in, his voice sharp enough to stop a clock. With her politics, Sienna mumbled. Lucas nodded slowly, a breath through his nose. So you deleted a paying guest's reservation because you disagreed with her beliefs. Sienna tried again, this time a little louder but shakier. I just thought with her record some of our regulars might feel uncomfortable. I was trying to keep things safe. Safe. Lucas repeated the word as if it had a bitter aftertaste. Then he shook his head slowly and looked her dead in the... Let me make something clear. Safety isn't built by excluding people who think differently than you. This cafe was built for service, hospitality, neutral ground, not political litmus tests, not gatekeeping. Sienna's face crumpled. I didn't mean it like that. Lucas stepped forward, not threatening, just definitive. You meant exactly what you did, and now you're going to face the consequences. Sienna's eyes widened. Wait, please. I didn't. Lucas cut her off, his voice low but unmistakably final. You're done here. Pack your things. Now. Gasps rippled through the cafe. Some guests blinked in shock. Others gave subtle nods. One older gentleman whispered to his wife, "That's how you handle it." Another muttered, "About time someone stood up to this nonsense." Karoline stood silently as it unfolded, arms at her side, her expression unreadable. This wasn't triumph. This was justice being restored, not with anger, but with authority. Sienna looked at her pleadingly. You don't have to do this. I didn't hurt anyone. Lucas didn't even look at Karoline. He answered himself. You hurt this business. You hurt our name. You made a decision that had nothing to do with service and everything to do with arrogance. Then he turned to Karoline. I'm sorry. She nodded once. I didn't want a scene. I just wanted coffee. And instead, Lucas said, you uncovered the exact kind of discrimination that people pretend doesn't exist. I'm grateful you called me. Sienna stepped back, her voice cracking. This is cancel culture in reverse. Lucas's head snapped toward her. No, he said. This is accountability. You used your job to discriminate against a guest based on ideology, and you did it thinking you'd be applauded for it. That's not courage. That's cowardice. That's misuse of trust. Sienna stood frozen for a long second, and then finally turned, retreating behind the counter toward the back hallway. Her steps rushed and uneven. As the door clicked shut behind her, the cafe finally breathed. Lucas exhaled and looked around. Apologies for the disruption, he said to the customers. If anyone here was made to feel uncomfortable, that ends today. We're better than this. The room stayed quiet, but the message landed. Lucas turned back to Karoline. Let me personally seat you. She shook her head gently. No need. I think this moment said enough. He looked down, nodded respectfully. You sure? Karoline glanced around at the still half-frozen cafe. Some patrons smiled at her. Others avoided her gaze. The air was still clearing. I think I've had all the caffeine I need, she replied with a soft edge in her voice. Lucas smiled faintly. Understood. But know this, I'll be rewriting policy today, and every employee will know exactly what happens when they put ideology before integrity. Karoline nodded, then extended her hand. Lucas took it. A few quiet claps broke out from the back. A woman at the bar raised her glass. Someone else called out softly, "Thank you for standing up." Karoline offered a simple smile and turned to leave. No fanfare, no anger. Just the quiet certainty that comes from standing your ground. As she walked toward the door, a young man near the exit caught her eye and whispered, "You handled that like a pro." "Thank you." She just nodded. Because this wasn't about being a hero. It was about drawing a line, one that too many had been afraid to draw. And when she stepped out into the sunshine of DC, she didn't carry victory. She carried clarity and a phone full of undeniable truth. It didn't take long. By the time Karoline Leavitt reached the sidewalk in front of Café Valou, the first video clip had already hit X, formerly known as Twitter. A man in his mid-60s who'd been sitting quietly near the bar with a black coffee and a flip phone had managed to record the entire confrontation without ever being noticed. No commentary, no edits, just raw footage. Sienna's dismissiveness, Karoline's calm, call the system logs, and finally Lucas Mero's entrance and immediate firing of his own employee. Within 15 minutes it had 12,000 views. Within 30 it had a hashtag Caroline vs Sienna. 2 hours later it was trending at number 3 nationwide. For millions of Americans, especially those who'd grown weary of being told to sit down, shut up, and accept that their values were outdated. The video was electric. Karoline didn't yell. She didn't storm. She didn't threaten. She didn't even gloat. She simply stood her ground and let facts do the talking. That alone made the moment powerful. But the fact that she had been refused service not for anything she did, but for who she was and what she believed, turned the incident into something much bigger than a cafe dispute. It became a national mirror, and everyone on both sides rushed to look into it. On the right, the response was immediate and fiery. Clips from Fox News began circulating before the afternoon ended. Conservative commentators posted breakdowns of Karoline's tone, her composure, her refusal to escalate. They didn't paint her as a victim. They painted her as a symbol. "This is how you fight back," wrote one post from @PatriotMikeUSA. No screaming, no cancel mobs, just truth, evidence, and courage. Another read, "Karoline Leavitt just proved what half of America already knows. Tolerance ends where your beliefs begin." She didn't flinch. She didn't bend. She exposed it in real time and made them own it. Supporters changed their profile pictures to screen grabs from the moment she showed Sienna the system log. The hashtag truth doesn't need permission started gaining traction. Some even dubbed her the Quiet Hammer, a nod to her calm, yet decisive dismantling of Sienna's political posturing. On Truth, social Donald Trump reposted the video with the caption, "They tried to cancel Karoline. She canceled their lies." Classy, smart, proud. That was all it took. The story had gone full-blown viral. But on the left, a different narrative took shape. Progressive influencers decried the moment as a calculated political stunt, accusing Karoline of using her power and platform to punish a young worker for protecting a safe space. They shared images of Sienna's flushed face zoomed in during the moment she was fired, framing her as a victim of conservative overreach. She stood for her values and lost her job for it. One popular post claimed, accompanied by the hashtag Justice for Sienna. Some accused Karoline of weaponizing civility, using calm tone and legal language to justify what they saw as ideological dominance. A viral post from a progressive educator read, "When the oppressor speaks softly, don't be fooled. The boot doesn't have to shout to crush." Others even called for a boycott of the entire Valou cafe chain, insisting that Lucas Mero's decision to fire Sienna was corporate appeasement to the far right. Still, despite the noise, something was different. Even among more moderate viewers, those who didn't necessarily align with either extreme, Karoline's handling of the situation struck a chord. Because whatever your politics, the facts were simple: a reservation was made. A guest was denied service. The reason was ideological, and the proof undeniable. That night, Karoline opened her X app, took a breath, and posted just one message. No graphics, no emojis, just words. I didn't ask to be served because I'm famous. I asked to be treated like any other customer. The fact that I wasn't, that I was erased from a system because of my beliefs, should alarm every American. This wasn't about fame. It was about fairness. The post racked up over 200,000 likes in under 6 hours. Her directness once again silenced the noise. There was no gloating, no gotcha tone, just a return to the fundamental question. Do we still believe in equal treatment in public spaces, or don't we? Karoline didn't need to scream it. She'd already lived it. The next morning, Café Valu's official account issued a brief but firm statement. We are committed to serving every customer with dignity and respect, regardless of background or belief. Our founder, Lucas Merrow, took immediate and appropriate action in response to yesterday's incident. We stand by that decision. Lucas followed it up with a personal post. This cafe is not a political institution. It's a business, and in business, personal judgment has no place in guest service. We don't refuse people over ideology. Period. Still, the storm wasn't over. Media outlets from all corners scrambled for interviews. ABC, CNN, and Newsmax all reached out to Karoline's team. Online petitions formed. Some called for stricter protections against viewpoint discrimination in service industries. Others called for Lucas to be held accountable for firing a young woman under conservative pressure. In a single day, a quiet afternoon coffee had turned into a national flashpoint. But through it all, Karoline stayed exactly the same: calm, precise, focused. When asked by a reporter outside her apartment whether she thought Sienna should have been fired, she answered simply, "I didn't call for her job. I didn't ask for a scene. I asked for my table." The rest happened because of the truth. What struck Americans, especially those in the 65-plus age group, wasn't just the story itself. It was the way it echoed a deeper frustration, that tolerance today too often comes with conditions. That freedom of thought is now something you have to hide behind fake names, whispered reservations, and backup plans. That if you don't toe the ideological line of the moment, you're erased not just from conversation, but from the system itself. And yet here was a young woman who didn't whine. She didn't retreat. She just calmly exposed the truth and let the public decide. In diners across Ohio, veterans' halls in Texas, and living rooms in Arizona, Americans had the same reaction. Finally, someone stood up and didn't back down. And more importantly, she didn't do it with rage. She did it with receipts. Karoline's final word that week came not on television, but in a follow-up post just 2 lines long. If justice depends on silence, then it's not justice. I'll keep standing. Simple. But for millions watching, it was enough. What began as a deleted reservation had now cascaded into a national awakening. For days, America watched the video of Karoline Leavitt confronting bias not with outrage, but with calm evidence and consequence. They saw a young conservative woman stand her ground in a cafe where tolerance had been redefined to exclude her. They saw truth triumph over theater. But what came next was more than vindication. It was reform. Behind the scenes, just hours after the video reached 2 million views, Lucas Merrow, founder and owner of the Valu cafe chain, called Karoline for a private meeting. They sat down in a quiet room on the top floor of his flagship location, just blocks from the Capitol. No cameras, no PR staff. Just 2 people who understood that leadership means more than public statements. "We can't leave it here." Lucas began pacing the room. "I've built this brand for a decade, Karoline. I've seen trends come and go. But this was a breach of something deeper, of trust. I need to clean house not just publicly but structurally. Karoline nodded. Then we changed the system. Quietly. Clearly. Permanently. Over black coffee and a yellow legal pad, they outlined the action steps, not just damage control, but a cultural reset. Step 1 was immediate: a full internal memo distributed to all locations nationwide, signed personally by Lucas. It read, "Effective immediately. Any refusal of service based on political beliefs, personal background, or perceived ideology will result in immediate termination. Our job is to serve, not to screen. Hospitality isn't selective, it's foundational." The language was bold, the tone unmistakable. Step 2 was education, not slogans, not slideshows, real training. Within 72 hours, Lucas implemented a new mandatory staff retraining program across all 48 value locations, in partnership with a neutral third-party service ethics consultant. The new curriculum focused on professional conduct, customer neutrality, and the dangers of ideological discrimination in public service. Good intentions don't excuse bad behavior. The opening line of the course read, "Your personal politics stay at home. At work, you serve the public." That's the job. But Karoline didn't stop there. In their follow-up session, she made a quiet but powerful proposal. "We both know that policies don't mean much without accountability," she said. "What you need isn't just rules. You need someone to test the rules." Lucas raised an eyebrow. "You mean audits?" Karoline smiled. "I mean anonymous oversight. Undercover visits. Call it secret shopping if you want. But once a month, randomly selected stores get evaluated not by a clipboard but by an everyday customer trained to detect bias. If something's off, you'll know." Lucas leaned back in his chair and nodded slowly. "I like it. Clean. Quiet. Effective. And let's be clear, I don't want another Sienna, or Avery, or whatever name they come with next. This ends now." That day, Lucas signed off on a new tier of internal auditing. It wasn't publicized. It didn't need to be. But for the employees of Value, the message was unmistakable. Your politics are not your permission slip. Your behavior is your record. The media took notice. At a quick press huddle outside the cafe 2 days later, reporters flanked Karoline for a comment. She didn't read from a script. She didn't bring notes. She looked directly at the cameras and spoke like someone who hadn't just won a moment, but had stewarded a mission. "This was never about me getting a table," she said. "It wasn't even about being refused. It's about what happens when we normalize exclusion under the name of progress. When politics replaces professionalism. When personal judgment becomes public policy, one coffee shop at a time. What happened here isn't just a footnote. It's a warning. If we don't draw the line now, we'll wake up one day and wonder how common sense became controversial." She didn't stay long. She didn't need to. Her words, like her actions, were simple and surgical. And once again, America responded. Later that evening, a new post appeared on X. No video, no hashtags, just a photo of Karoline walking out of the cafe that day, shoulders back, face calm, phone in hand. The caption read, "She didn't shout, demand her rights. She just held up the truth, and the system changed." That post alone was reshared over 500,000 times. In the comments, Americans of all ages weighed in. One retired Marine wrote, "I served for the kind of country where someone like her gets to speak without fear. I'm glad to see she remembers that freedom works both ways." A retired teacher from Kentucky replied, "I may not agree with everything she believes, but I agree with this: fairness means everyone, even the people you don't like." And perhaps most striking was a reply from a former Democrat city councilwoman. "If a progressive staffer can refuse service to someone over politics, what's to stop a conservative staffer from doing the same? We either believe in neutrality or we don't." That's what struck the heart of the public conversation. Karoline hadn't made it about sides. She made it about standards. And when standards are clear, accountability becomes less about punishment and more about protection. In the weeks that followed, other businesses began quietly reviewing their internal service guidelines. One independent bookstore in Oregon posted a new notice at the front door. "We may disagree with your bumper sticker, your faith, or your vote, but inside these walls you are a customer." Period. A hardware store in Georgia posted something similar. And in a letter to subscribers, the CEO of a national diner chain wrote, "Thanks to a young woman with backbone, we're reminded that our job isn't to profile people, it's to serve them. We're updating our training, and we're proud of it." As for Karoline, she didn't go on a media tour. She didn't monetize the moment. She went home, responded to letters from older veterans and young students, and quietly returned to work. But the ripple she caused didn't fade. Because her story wasn't sensational. It was principled, and that made it stick. It reminded Americans, especially those over 65, of a time when courtesy was nonpartisan, when a reservation was a promise, and when service meant service, not political approval. Karoline didn't win because she had power. She won because she had proof, and the patience to wield it with grace. In one final post a week after the incident, Karoline wrote, "Freedom means being treated fairly, even when someone disagrees with you. That's all I asked for, and that's what we all deserve." 12 words. And the country listened. Because in a world addicted to noise, Karoline Leavitt reminded America that sometimes the most powerful weapon is a calm voice backed by truth. Life lesson. 200 words. American English. In today's divided world, it's easy to forget one simple truth. Respect shouldn't depend on politics. The story of Karoline Leavitt reminds us that fairness and civility are not outdated values, they're cornerstones of a decent society. Whether you're a former soldier, a retired teacher, or a lifelong small business owner, you know that when service becomes political, trust is the first casualty. Karoline didn't raise her voice. She didn't demand special treatment. She asked to be treated like any other paying customer. And when she wasn't, she responded with calm, truth, and integrity. That's a lesson worth remembering, especially in a time when shouting often drowns out reason. This isn't just a story about a cafe. It's about where we are as a country, and where we're headed if we don't speak up. Civility doesn't mean silence. It means standing firm, even when the world tells you to sit down. Have you ever been treated differently because of what you believe? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to like and rewatch if this story speaks to something deeper you've seen in America today. Let's keep the conversation going.